Move that ugly fence before I call the HOA board and have you fined into next year. That was the first thing Karen ever said to me. Not hello, not good morning, not welcome to the neighborhood. No, she stood there in her designer robe and spotless slippers, pointing a manicured finger at the old barbed wire fence I built with my own damn hands, and barked orders like she owned the county. You ever get that feeling like your blood's boiling under your skin, but you keep your face flat? That's what I felt that morning. I didn't yell. I didn't cuss. I didn't even blink. I just stared at her like a man stares at a sudden snake on his porch, more confused than afraid, because you can't quite believe what just slithered into your piece. Now, maybe I should back up a bit. My name's Daniel. I'm a retired firefighter from Colorado Springs, and I've spent 30 damn years running into burning buildings, pulling kids from wrecks, and watching good men die with soot in their lungs. I didn't ask for much in retirement, just peace, space, and a patch of land I could call my own without anyone breathing down my neck. So I bought 10 acres just outside Boulder. Beautiful place. Pine trees tall as cathedral spires. A creek that whispers in the morning. Deer that come so close you can hear them chew. I built my own damn cabin. Put in a vegetable garden. Got a dog named Ranger who's sweeter than a cinnamon roll unless you're a squirrel. Life was good. It was real good until the neighborhood started changing. At first, it was little things. More cars on the road. Kids on electric scooters zipping past the pasture. Then came the new development, Willow Pines. They cleared out a big stretch of forest to build pastel-colored houses on quarter-acre lots and called it rural luxury. Ain't that something? They brought in paved roads, street lights, and of course the HOA. I didn't sign anything. My land was never part of their plan. I was grandfathered in, free as the breeze. But see, freedom scares folks like K. Karen Mitchell. Late 40s, blazer at 8 a.m., pearls at noon. Walks like every inch of sidewalk belongs to her heels. She and her husband, Richard, moved in 2 years ago on a property not even half an acre, but she strutted around like she owned the mountain. First few times I saw her, I gave her a neighborly nod, got a tight-lipped smile back. Then the notes started showing up, sticky ones on my gate. Please trim your trees, they block my sun. Your tractor is unsightly, please relocate. This fence violates the HOA's design code. The nerve. My fence on my land. Built with my own back-breaking labor and more than a few busted knuckles. Still, I tried to be nice. I invited her and Richard over for a barbecue, even made lemon iced tea because someone told me she liked it. They never showed. Next thing I know, she's calling animal control because Ranger barked twice at a rabbit. Said he was a menace to tranquility. You've had a city girl try to tell you what tranquility is? That was when I realized I wasn't dealing with a neighbor. I was dealing with a tyrant. She didn't want peace. She wanted power. And she wasn't satisfied until she had me under her thumb. Problem was, I don't fit under anybody's damn thumb. Then came the big one, the property line argument. She showed up one morning, bold as brass, claiming she had a survey that proved my fence was on her land. Said I had 30 days to move it back or she'd sue. I asked to see the survey. She refused. Said it was confidential HOA documentation. What kind of nonsense is that? I've seen better fiction in daytime soap operas. That night, I sat on my porch, looked at my fence, and thought, this is what they mean when they say freedom ain't free. Not because of taxes, not because of laws, but because of people like Karen, people who see freedom as an obstacle to control. So I hired my own surveyor, a real one, not some HOA crony. Cost me a couple grand out of pocket, but peace of mind is priceless. When he came back with the results, I'll never forget what he said. Daniel, not only is your fence in the right place, her shed and part of her backyard are on your land. I remember just sitting there, looking at the map, letting it sink in. She had built her little empire, her perfectly mulched flower beds, her no trespassing signs, all on stolen ground. And she had the gall to threaten me? That's when something shifted. You know that feeling? When the line gets drawn in the sand? I wasn't going to move my fence. I was going to take back what was mine. But I didn't yell. I didn't storm over with a shotgun or bang on her front door. That ain't my style. No, I played the long game. I called my lawyer, filed the proper paperwork, got the county records updated, flagged the real boundary with bright orange markers. Then I waited. Next morning, she was out there, robe flapping like a damn flag, yelling about property values and HOA bylaws. I just pointed to the deed and said, that shed, that rose bush, that hot tub you keep posting about in your HOA newsletters, they're all mine. She lost it, eyes bulging, screaming like a tea kettle left on too long. Neighbors peeked out their windows. Richard looked like he wanted to melt into the mulch. I stayed calm, didn't raise my voice once. Because when you've run into burning buildings for a living, a woman in slippers yelling on a lawn just doesn't hit the same. But let me be clear, this wasn't about revenge. This was about dignity. I gave her 30 days. 30 days to move her shed, transplant her garden, relocate her lawn decorations. She ignored me. Posted in the HOA Facebook group calling me a terrorist. Tried to get the board to find me. But guess what? They didn't have jurisdiction. Not 1 inch of their bylaws touched my ranch. So I waited until day 30. Contractors pulled up right on schedule, and as they rolled in, the look on her face changed. Something broke in her eyes. Not anger, not even fear. Just the realization that her game was over. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just fighting me. She was fighting something bigger. Maybe age, maybe time, maybe the sinking truth that control is an illusion and the world doesn't revolve around manicured lawns and board meetings. And I'll be damned if I let that illusion creep 1 inch further into my life. So if you're reading this and you're an old soul like me, man over 60 with calloused hands and a heart that's still too soft for this world, let me say something plain. Don't let them push you off your land. They'll come with smiles and surveys. They'll come with bylaws and bullshit. They'll tell you it's for the good of the neighborhood, the property values, the aesthetic. But what they really want is to carve out your backbone and hang it on a wall like a trophy. Stand firm. Plant your boots. Because this land, this soil, this life you built with your own damn hands, it's worth defending. Even if the whole neighborhood thinks you're the villain. Especially then. Because in a world full of Karens, the last thing we need is one more man who backs down. And friend, I'm not that man. Not now. Not ever. I didn't sleep much the night I got the survey results. Not because I was anxious, no. It was something else. That restless energy you feel when justice finally has a shape, when the truth has teeth and you're just waiting for the right moment to let it bite. I sat on my porch with Ranger curled at my feet, the deed clutched in one hand and a black cup of coffee in the other, listening to the wind as it teased through the pine branches. Somewhere past the hills, an owl hooted once. I stared at that fence, the one I built when I first moved in, and realized it wasn't just wood and wire anymore. It was a line in the dirt, and Karen had crossed it. The next morning, I woke up early and started putting up a new fence, one that matched the actual property line. Tall, sturdy, made of rough cedar and painted a dark barn red. It wasn't for keeping anything in. It was for keeping one thing out. Her. I placed little orange survey flags every few feet along the new boundary. Didn't say a word to anyone. Just built. Let the hammer speak for me. The sound of nails driving into wood echoed through the neighborhood like a drumbeat of resistance. By mid-afternoon, Karen came stomping across her lawn. No robe this time. She'd gone full battlefield mode. Slacks, blazer, clipboard in hand, eyes locked on me like a hawk that smelled weakness. But there was no weakness here. Just a man with calloused hands and a paper trail. What do you think you're doing? She snapped, voice tight and sharp. I didn't look up. Building on my land. That's not your land, she hissed. You're encroaching. I pointed to the flagged boundary. Survey says otherwise. I've got county certification if you'd like to see it. Or you can wait for the paperwork to hit your mailbox. For a second, her face twitched somewhere between disbelief and rage. Then the meltdown began. You're going to ruin the neighborhood, she barked. This is barbaric. You're lowering our property values. That's the moment I understood something. It was never about the fence. It was never even about the land. It was about control. Karen needed to be queen of her cul-de-sac kingdom. She needed people like me, independent, unbothered, unregulated, to either fall in line or get out of her sight. And I was neither of those options. I was a wall she couldn't move. So she did what people like her always do when the rules no longer serve them. She made noise. That evening, I received an email from the HOA. Apparently, I was being fined $5,000 for unauthorized construction, visual pollution, and my personal favorite, creating a divisive atmosphere. The HOA president, a man I'd never spoken to, ended the email with a thinly veiled threat about further legal action. I laughed so hard I choked on my jerky. Let them try. But I wasn't about to go toe-to-toe with a swarm of suits without a plan. I called Chuck, my lawyer and an old friend from firehouse days. He'd gone to law school after his second back injury ended his time on the force, the kind of guy who wore cowboy boots to court and didn't flinch at red tape. When I explained the situation, he whistled low. Karen Mitchell? Hell, I've heard of her. She's got a reputation. Real estate brokers whisper her name like she's the boogeyman. Then she picked the wrong house to haunt, I said. Chuck got to work faster than a house cat spotting a mouse. Within a week, he'd filed a formal response to the HOA, a cease and desist against Karen for harassment, and a preliminary claim for property encroachment damages. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was the drone footage. See, one of the neighbor's kids, a smart kid named Mason, had a drone he used for his YouTube channel. I offered him $50 and a couple cans of root beer to get aerial footage of the property line. What we got was gold, a full 360-degree view showing Karen's shed, her flower beds, and about 10 feet of her backyard clearly over the line. I didn't even have to say anything when I showed the footage at the town hall meeting, just played the video on loop. The silence was thicker than molasses in winter. But Karen didn't back down. Oh no. She doubled down, called for an emergency HOA meeting exclusive to board members. Tried to rally neighbors against me by passing around pictures of my so-called offensive fence and old photos of Ranger barking behind the gate like he was Cujo. But it didn't work. One by one, folks started peeling away from her. Old Mr. Baxter, who'd once voted her in his chair, now shook his head and muttered "tyrant" under his breath when she passed. Even Richard, her husband, seemed to grow quieter, smaller. I noticed he started spending more time in the garage, fiddling with a classic Corvette he never used to touch. Then came the surveillance cameras. One morning I stepped outside and noticed a sleek little black camera mounted on a pole in Karen's yard, aimed directly at my back porch. I stared at it for a minute, then walked back inside and grabbed a can of silver spray paint. I didn't even bother hiding what I was doing. Just strolled over, aimed high, and gave that lens a fresh coat of "get the hell out of my life," and screamed from her kitchen window like I'd committed murder. I waved politely, turned around, and got back to trimming my hedges. Things escalated quickly after that. She started filing complaints with the county, noise violations, improper waste disposal, claims that I was running an unlicensed construction business. Each time, the inspectors showed up, scratched their heads, and left with apologies. One of them, a young guy named Tyler, even stayed for lunch, said my barbecue was the best he'd had in months. I sent him home with a bag of smoked brisket and a copy of the survey map, just in case. The truth was, Karen had overplayed her hand. She'd built her little empire on a lie and couldn't stomach the fact that someone saw through it. But I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for restoration. She had 30 days to move her stuff. I didn't lift a finger against her property. I didn't tear down her shed or poison her roses. I just gave her the chance to make it right. But people like Karen never believe the storm is coming until it's already at their door. Day 30 came, and so did the crew. 2 men with gloves and hard hats. They didn't speak much, just nodded, checked the paperwork, and waited for my word. I looked toward Karen's house. No movement, no sound. Then, just as the first post was lifted, the front door burst open. Karen came flying out, hair a mess, mascara streaked like war paint, and something gleaming in her hand, a hammer. She wasn't coming to negotiate. She was coming to fight. I stepped between her and the shed, calm as ever. Karen, I said, this doesn't have to get ugly. She looked at me, eyes wild, breath ragged. You think this is funny? You think you can take everything I've built and smile about it? No, I said. I think you built on land that didn't belong to you, and now it's time to make it right. She raised the hammer, not at me, but at her own shed. The first swing splintered a panel. The second cracked the little window with the decorative frame. I didn't stop her. She screamed with every strike, a woman unraveling, her illusion shattering in sync with the wood. The neighbors watched in stunned silence. Wanted to speak, but didn't have the words. And when it was done, when she collapsed on the grass, breathless, hair matted, and hands trembling, I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh. I just looked at her and said, this could have ended differently. That was the truth. It didn't have to be a war, but she started one, and I finished it. Because sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to build a wall high enough they can't climb. Not to shut out the world, but to remind the world there are some things too sacred to trespass, like honor, like quiet, like a man's right to live free on his own damn land. It had been 3 days since Karen took a hammer to her own shed like a woman possessed, and somehow I knew that wasn't her final act. You can always tell when a person's holding back one last card, and Karen wasn't the folding type. She was a dealer of chaos, and her deck was never empty. That morning I was sitting on my porch, coffee in hand, rangers snoring at my boots, when I saw a white SUV pull up slowly to the edge of my drive. Tinted windows, official plates, and a county seal on the door. 2 men stepped out in suits, one bald with clipboard arms, the other slick-haired and young, carrying a tablet. They had that look. You know the look. Men who didn't grow up working the land, but had spent years telling others how they should. Mr. Daniels, the younger one asked. I nodded. Depends who's asking. We're with Willow Pines Homeowners Association Compliance Committee, he said, like that was supposed to scare me. I took a long sip of coffee. This land isn't in Willow Pines, the bald one interjected, flipping through papers. According to our maps, there's a boundary overlap. We're here to document what we believe to be unauthorized construction. I handed him a thick folder, certified survey results, legal documentation, and a recent correction from the county land office. His face shifted the moment he flipped to the second page. It's always something to watch a man realize he's been sent to fight a battle that's already lost. I suggest, I said calmly, you take a walk back to the SUV before you get charged with trespassing. Karen appeared from behind a hedge like a ghost that refused to rest. She had that same stormy look in her eyes, lips tight, voice full of venom. You think this is over? You think because you won one round, you've beaten the system? No, I said, I think I beat you. And the system's next. She tried to argue, but just then a sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind their SUV. Deputy Lisa Daniels stepped out, no relation, just good timing. She'd grown up a few towns over. I'd once pulled her uncle out of a barn fire 20 years ago, back when she was still in high school. We shared a bond most people wouldn't understand. You run through smoke with a man's life in your arms, and the world looks different after that. Everything all right here, Daniel? She asked. These folks are trespassing, I said, handing her the same file. She looked it over, nodded slowly, then turned to Karen and the committeemen. This isn't your jurisdiction, she said flatly. You're standing on land recorded as independent property since before Willow Pines was even named on a map. You have no authority here. Karen opened her mouth and closed it again. The suit shuffled awkwardly and finally retreated. Karen glared at me one last time before disappearing down the sidewalk like a dog that bit its own tail. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't over. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got a letter from the city. An official complaint had been filed. Alleged zoning violations. Accusations of watershed disruption. Illegal fencing. It was all smoke and no fire, but it still made my stomach tighten. You see, when you've lived long enough, you learn the worst threats don't always come from across the fence line. Sometimes they come with stationery and a return address. So I spent that entire day digging through every permit I ever pulled, every receipt, every inspection report, every handwritten note I ever made about my builds. I wanted everything airtight, because even when you know you're right, it only takes one wrong page to let the devil in the door. Next morning at exactly 9 a.m., a White City utility truck pulled up. Two inspectors got out. Dana, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, and Ed, an older gentleman with a mustache that had seen decades of nonsense. They were respectful, I'll give them that. Dana asked if she could walk the property. I said, of course. I handed her the folder, same one I gave the HOA and the sheriff. They spent 2 hours checking everything, measuring the fence, photographing the shed, even poking around the compost pile like they were expecting to find Jimmy Hoffa buried beneath the eggshells. When they were done, Dana looked at me with a strange mix of surprise and professional courtesy. Mr. Daniels, she said, everything checks out. Your permits are solid. Your structures are within legal boundaries. Your runoff is actually over compliant. We're closing the complaint with no violations. I nodded. Not a smile, not a smirk, just a quiet, heavy breath of relief. But the peace didn't last long. Chuck called me later that afternoon. He'd gotten a tip from a mutual friend. Karen wasn't acting alone anymore. Some HOA board members had joined her crusade. There were whispers of a bigger move, an effort to declare my land non-compliant community-adjacent property. I didn't even know what the hell that meant. Chuck did. He said it was a backdoor maneuver, legal gymnastics that could let the HOA impose restrictions on land that bordered theirs, even if it wasn't officially inside the boundary. It had been done before in other counties. Rare, dirty, but possible. That's when I made my move. I uploaded everything to the public record. I posted drone footage, legal documents, and timelines to the neighborhood's community site. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just showed the truth. I titled the post, "This is what happens when you let power go unchecked." Within 24 hours, the comments lit up. Neighbors who once hid behind hedges were now furious. Turns out Karen had been billing HOA funds for board supplies that never reached the clubhouse. One woman recognized her missing bench from the common garden, sitting right on Karen's back patio. Another man found his decorative lights boxed in her shed. Then came the whistleblower. A handwritten letter in my mailbox. No name. Just one line. Check the HOA storage unit behind the clubhouse. I drove down that afternoon, unlocked the door, and what I saw made my jaw tighten. Stacks of unopened supplies, tools, lighting kits, even a damn pressure washer. All billed to the HOA, all unused, all hoarded. I took pictures, sent them to Chuck. We filed a formal fraud complaint with the regional HOA oversight board. Karen's house was about to go from a palace to a courtroom exhibit. The fallout was fast. The oversight board launched an investigation. Karen was suspended pending review. Her empire crumbled overnight. But what surprised me wasn't her silence. It was Richard's, her husband. For the first time in 2 years, he reached out. He came over, alone, no clipboard, no glare. Just a tired man with a look I recognized. The look of someone who's held their breath for too long. She wouldn't stop, he said, no matter how many times I told her. I know, I said. I don't care about the shed, the patio, the garden. I just want my life back. I looked at him. For the first time, I saw not an enemy, but another casualty. I can't erase what she did, I told him. But I won't stand in the way if you're trying to make it right. And just like that, the war started winding down. Not with fireworks, but with honesty. A week later, Karen moved out. The house was listed the next day. Richard vanished too. The county bought the land and asked if I wanted to sell the disputed strip back. I told them no, I'm keeping it. Not for spite, but for memory. Because that fence, it's more than boards and nails. It's a reminder. You push an old man too far, you might just find out he's still got a fire burning. And that fire doesn't go out easy. Not when it's fed by principle. Not when it's home. By the time the dust settled from Karen's fallout and the for sale sign on her front lawn faded into a county park project, I figured I'd finally earned a bit of peace. I'd mowed my property with a fresh breath of satisfaction, fixed the barn roof, taught Ellie and the neighbor kids how to paint birdhouses, and even planted a new row of apple trees by the fence where her shed used to stand. The fence stood firm, like a quiet monument, wood, steel, and proof that I wouldn't be pushed. I'd started walking more too. Just me, the breeze, and Ranger trotting along like a furry shadow. I didn't think about HOAs. I didn't think about Karen. Hell, I even stopped watching the mailbox like it might explode. But as any man who's lived long enough knows, just when you start letting your guard down, life has a way of knocking. It started with a letter. Not a complaint, not a fine, something far more slippery. It came from the county assessor's office. Thick paper, stiff envelope, formal language. I remember sitting at the table, glasses on, a fresh pot of coffee brewing behind me. The moment I saw the words boundary dispute and adjacent property claim, I felt it in my gut. It was the same feeling I used to get in a burning house. Heat you can't see but know is about to explode. This time, though, it wasn't Karen. It was someone new, someone worse. Bradley Wallace. I'd only met the man once, and even that had left me needing a hot shower. He was the kind of guy who shook your hand with a salesman's smile and immediately scanned your land like it was inventory. He'd moved into one of those shiny new estates at the edge of the cul-de-sac where all the houses looked like they were printed from the same luxury brochure. Word was, he was a big shot realtor. HOA board member. Smooth talker. Greased hair, gold watch, everything pressed and polished but dead behind the eyes. That one time we talked, he asked if I'd ever considered unlocking some value by parceling off part of my acreage. I told him the same thing I told Karen, just in fewer words, over. My dead body. And now it looked like he wanted to make that phrase a legal reality. The claim was neat, precise, and dirty as hell. Bradley was arguing that a decades-old discrepancy in original subdivision maps gave him grounds to petition for a boundary adjustment, one that would hand him nearly half an acre of my western land, my orchard, part of my creek. The same creek I dug by hand where the local kids splashed every summer, where I'd planted willows and lined the edge with stone for Ellie to sit and feed the birds. His lawyer used words like unused potential, community enhancement, and resale optimization. I used words too, none of them polite. I called Chuck the minute I finished reading. He answered on the first ring. "You're not going to believe this," I said. "I already do," he replied. "It's Bradley, right?" I sat back in my chair. "You know him?" "I've sued him before," he said. "Guy's a real estate vulture. Uses legal gray zones to gobble up land for pennies and flip it into HOA, controlled leverage. He doesn't break the law. He bends it until it begs." "Well," I said, voice firming, "he's about to learn this land doesn't bend." Chuck chuckled. "Good. Well, buckle up, Daniel. Guys like him don't swing hammers. They swing lawsuits." He was right. 3 days later, I found a laminated notice taped to my gate. Bradley was officially petitioning the county for a public hearing to review and redefine the property line. He wanted the court to decide whether the original builder's oversight made my western edge up for grabs. And just like that, we were back in the ring. Only this time, I came swinging first. I dug into every record I had, old purchase agreements, aerial photos dating back 15 years, copies of the deed, surveys from the day I bought the land. I even unearthed a yellowing newspaper clipping from a decade ago, me and Ranger posing with a shovel at the edge of the newly dug creek, next to a sign that read Veteran Builds Wildlife Oasis for Local School Kids. I had video from neighborhood BBQs, testimonies from neighbors, and drone footage of the trees I'd planted with my own damn hands. This wasn't just my land. It was legacy. The hearing took place in a small room at the county courthouse. Just a few chairs, a board bailiff, and a judge who looked like he'd rather be fishing. Bradley arrived looking like a movie villain, tailored gray suit, sleek shoes, a Mont Blanc pen clipped to his folder like a dagger. His lawyer was younger, cocky, the type who says technically a lot. I walked in with my boots, my binder, and the quiet weight of truth. Chuck sat beside me, calm as a stone wall. Bradley's side opened with a slick presentation, charts, diagrams, color-coded maps showing my creek spilling accidentally into his lot. It talked about subdivision intent, efficiency, and community value. They even played a short animation of how a walking path could replace my orchard. The judge nodded, unimpressed. Then it was our turn. Chuck stood, said nothing flashy. No animation. Just hard paper facts. He laid out our survey results, historical land use, neighbor affidavits, and the timeline of ownership. Then he handed over a large photo. Ellie, 5 years old, feeding ducks by the creek she called Magic River. The judge took a long pause. Then he looked at Bradley. Mr. Wallace, he said, have you ever physically entered the disputed area? Bradley blinked. No, Your Honor, but I've reviewed satellite footage. That's not what I asked. Silence. The judge turned back to Chuck. Any counterclaims? Chuck stood. Yes, Your Honor. Trespass, harassment, and attempted misrepresentation of historical use. Bradley turned red. His lawyer stood to object. The judge raised a hand. I've heard enough. He picked up the gavel. Slammed it once. Petition denied. Land rights remain with Mr. Daniels. Case closed. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, but as I walked past Bradley, I leaned in and said softly, tell the rest of your friends, this ranch doesn't move. I figured that would be the end of it, but when I got home, there was a package waiting on my porch. No name, no stamp. Inside, a leather-bound notebook and a note. Karen kept this. You should see what's inside. R. I sat on the porch for hours flipping through it. It was all there. Karen's notes. Names. Strategies. Copies of HOA emails. Expenses rerouted. Notes like Bradley interested in West Edge and push Daniels until he snaps. And on the final page, scribbled in shaky red ink, the fence was never the problem. The problem was I couldn't control him. That night, I built a fire, burned the copy of the boundary petition, but I kept the notebook, not as a trophy, as a warning. You see, in this life, they won't always come with guns or fists. Sometimes they come with smiles, with maps, with words like neighborly advice. But when they come for your land, for your quiet, for your freedom, you stand. You build your fences tall. You drive your stakes deep. And you never, ever back up just because someone in a pressed shirt says you should. Because here, on this patch of dirt I call mine, control doesn't live, only roots. It was late spring when the wind shifted again. The orchard was blooming. Ranger had claimed a shady spot under the newly finished birdhouse display, and I was working on repainting the side of the barn Ellie had covered in chalk drawings the summer before. Things felt quiet again. After Bradley's defeat and the leather-bound notebook from Karen, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally cleared the storm. But peace is a funny thing. It doesn't last long when folks with titles think silence is weakness. I'd barely finished my morning coffee when the first sign came. A small gathering near the park pavilion, what used to be Karen's stomping ground, HOA members murmuring around a clipboard, shooting glances toward my fence. I recognized one of them, Marcy, soft-spoken, used to bake lemon bars for board meetings. The others were newer, fresh recruits. But their postures, their whispers, they had that same scent Karen had worn like perfume. Control. Sure enough, by week's end, I received a letter, an official HOA recommendation to revisit unified design principles for community-facing properties. I wasn't named, but the image printed on the last page was unmistakable. A photo of my barn, my fence, and the orchard beyond it. To preserve aesthetic integrity, it read. That phrase, God, it stank like mildew under fresh paint. I took it to Chuck. He skimmed it, sighed, and said, "This isn't a demand. It's bait." "What kind of bait?" I asked. "They want you to swing first. File a complaint, make noise. Then they'll act like victims. Turn community sympathy against you. Bradley might have lost the land, but these people, they play long games. I didn't bite. I fixed the barn roof. Planted marigolds by the gate. Repaired the old tractor Ellie liked to climb on. And waited. 2 weeks passed. Then came the city envelope. This one wasn't pretty. It was a formal code review request, signed off by the local zoning authority. We have received multiple complaints citing unauthorized structures, agricultural encroachment, and potential watershed violations. An inspection is scheduled. I laughed. Hard, then cold. I'd been through this song before. Every permit I owned was filed, copied, laminated, and triple checked. They could bring a drone, a tape measure, even the National Guard. My ranch stood cleaner than a surgeon's scalpel. But it wasn't the inspection that rattled me. It was the persistence. This wasn't just about aesthetics anymore. They wanted me gone. The inspector showed up on a Tuesday. Young guy, polite, named Marcus. Roba County marked SUV, carried a tablet and a puzzled expression. "Mr. Daniels," he said, "I've gone through your files. Honestly, sir, you're more compliant than most subdivisions." I nodded. "Tell that to the clipboards down the hill." He chuckled. "I will. After this, your files getting flagged as high integrity means we won't bother you unless there's real cause." That should have been the end of it. I walked him out, thanked him, even gave him a jar of Ellie's homemade apple jelly. Then he paused. "One thing, though, off record, there's been an unusual uptick in anonymous complaints from your HOA zone, way above normal. They're clogging the system." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're telling me that why?" He hesitated. "Because, sir, they're not just about fences anymore. They're asking questions about livestock, solar panels, even your niece's weekend lemonade stand." That hit different. This wasn't about land. They were going after my life now. Ellie's innocence. The apple trees we planted together. The way we spent Saturdays painting birdhouses and reading under the willows by the creek. The HOA wasn't satisfied with my boundary. They wanted to sterilize everything I touched. I called Chuck again. "Can I sue the board as a whole?" "Technically, no. But you can go after individuals for malicious conduct. You just need evidence." That's when I remembered the notebook. Karen's ledger. Her list of names. Dates. Emails. Expense logs for everything from private gifts to petty revenge schemes. What if these new complaints were coming from the same people she used to scheme with? What if Karen wasn't a rogue queen, but part of a deeper rot? I spent 3 nights cross-referencing Karen's notes with the names on recent HOA letters. One name showed up too often, Dale McCready, new treasurer, quiet. Seemed harmless at meetings. But in Karen's notebook, he was marked with a red asterisk. Approved invoice fraud, July 2022, hand-delivered fencing complaint to county. Possibly funded Bradley's survey. That was enough for me. I dug deeper. Public records. Vendor payments. HOA expense reports. The new park benches. Turns out they were billed twice. Once by the supplier, once by a shell company registered under McCready's cousin's name. The lemonade complaint? Filed by someone named M. Crady using a burner email. I smiled. They'd gotten lazy. I packaged it all. Sent it to Chuck. "We don't need a lawsuit," he said. "We need a spotlight." That Friday, I called in a favor from a local reporter who once did a story on my wildlife restoration. I handed him everything: documents, photos, timeline, even snippets from Karen's notebook. He published the story under the title HOA or Personal Empire. Inside Willow Pine's corruption. It exploded. Within 24 hours, the HOA board was in panic mode. Emergency meetings, resignations. Marcy stepped down, citing health reasons. Dale vanished from public view. I got a call from the Oversight Council. Not an apology, but a request. Would you be willing to help restructure the HOA into something community-led? I laughed, then paused. Only on one condition, I said. No meetings behind closed doors. Everything happens at the park. Public. Transparent. They agreed. 2 months later, I sat under the big oak tree at Willow Pines Park. Not as a victim, not as a nuisance, as the newly appointed chair of community oversight. It wasn't power I wanted. It was peace. And to make damn sure no one else got steamrolled like I did. We rewrote the charter, killed off the find first mentality, banned anonymous complaints unless verified. We built a real community garden, added benches, repaired the playground slide, and something shifted. People smiled again. Kids played again. Even the old guys started swapping stories again at morning coffee outside the general store. I thought that was the end. But then, well, one evening, I got a letter, handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. So was the scent, lavender and regret. It read, "You didn't break me." But I learned something. The fence was never the problem. It was me. Okay? I didn't keep it, didn't frame it. Just folded it, tossed it into the fire pit, and watched it curl into ash. Some ghosts deserve peace. Others deserve to disappear. That night, I stood by the fence. The wind rustled the marigolds. Ranger leaned against my leg. Ellie came out, held my hand. "Uncle Dan," she said, "can we build another birdhouse tomorrow?" I looked out over the orchard, the creek, the house with the porch light glowing warm. "Yeah," I said, "we've got plenty of wood and time." Because what they don't tell you is that the strongest fences aren't built with nails. They're built with truth, with memory, with quiet defiance. And if they come again, let them try. This land remembers, and so do I.